I'm Steve Lee and I'm the Chief Exec from CIWM. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity today. It was only sprung on me as a pleasant surprise about midnight last night, and you can see how perfectly I'm prepared. I wanted to be fairly dismal, and I wanted to say that I think that science and waste and resource management is on a fairly sticky wicket in a postmodern world. Science talks about risk, science talks about probability. It opens itself up to attack. It's about being beaten up by fellow scientists. It's about being prepared to be questioned about your evidence and your conclusions. What do people want instead? People want information black and white. They want it now. They want it from people that they know and that they're prepared to believe in. And in many cases, they want science or information that already backs up a personally strongly held belief that they've got. So the gulf between science and real data and real people in a postmodern world, I think, is probably wider than it has ever been. Now then, I've been a scientist. I started off as a boffin, so I know a little bit about being a bad scientist. Fortunately for me, I was an engineering geologist, so most of my patients had been dead for either tens of millions of years or hundreds of millions of years. So it didn't actually matter that much, but it taught me an awful lot about how to be a clever, bad manipulator of information and data. And I thought I'd just share 8 degrees of confusion with you. The first is starting off with a predetermined result. As a bad scientist, of course, I always write, in inverted commas, conclusion, bad science. Second is untested science. We can all dip into the interweb, we can find 10 different opinions on something that's very, very important, and we can come up with an absolute plethora of apparently scientifically based opinions that we have to try and assimilate and decide which we think is right. And don't be fooled. Everybody out there is already looking for the evidence, the scientific opinion that bolsters opinion that they probably already hold. Thirdly, ungrounded. And a great example here is the science or the data that the pest control operators came out with about a couple of years ago, and the increase in the rat population. They said it was due to overzealous feeding of birds by people who want to care for them. It was caused by poorly controlled and managed drains. They said it may be something to do with refuse in sacks and alternate weekly collection. The opinion that the press wanted to latch onto was this was down to waste in sacks and alternate weekly collection, and all of the rest didn't matter. So subsequently, their report has become that alternate weekly collection, food in sacks, has caused an explosion in the rat population. Is that supported by their own information and data? Well, if they're here, I'd like to hear their opinion, because I personally don't think it does. Fourth degree of fuzz or uncertainty is old data, and there's tons of it around, whether it's dioxin death from emissions, whether it's the 1920s based belief that radium was good for you. You could get radium toothpaste, for heaven's sake, and people thought that was good for you. And the UK is the dirty man of Europe, all based on sound data and evidence, isn't it? In 1998, our recovery of packaging was 28%, way, way below the European 15 average. In 2007, Germany beat us at 67%. We were 62%. EU 15 average 60%, and yet my mum still believes we are the dirty man of Europe and that we are underperforming. What is the truth? For heaven's sake, guys, find out the real data and make sure that's what we are pushing across. Fifth degree of uncertainty, poor data. Oh, blimey. Have you ever come across an industry that's blessed with such poor data as us? Incomplete, out of date, not matching, big gaps that we've got to fill. Poor data, we are probably the guiltiest industry that there is in this country. Sixth degree of fuzz is immature tools to put that incomplete or old data to work. Life cycle assessment, I've been peddling life cycle assessment as answering all of our questions for at least the last decade. We're all using it in different ways, we're plugging different data in, we're putting different bounds around our investigation, and we're coming up with conclusions that in many cases bolster the belief that we went into the investigation with. We've got to get serious about life cycle assessment. We've got to measure, we've got to report on a consistent basis. We don't, we haven't ever. Seventh degree of fuzz, selected evidence. There was an outbreak of strains, breaks, trips and falls caused by platform soles from the fashion conscious in the 1970s. So therefore I conclude that shoes are bad for you. You know, selective use of data, the world is absolutely rife with it. I suspect we're as guilty of it as we are, as other people are, when they come back with their spuriously based arguments for us. And the 8th degree of fuzz is probably the one that rules them all and in the darkness binds them, and that is the conspiracy theory. And I bet you that if I went out today and I tried to find believers in the following, I could probably do it. I've been talking to a normally well-informed group of people in Utah who have uncovered a story in the Sunday Spoof from 1952 that proves that Western governments have been conspiring to hide from us, the public, that the carbon dioxide in polar bear breath is actually causing ice melt in the northern hemisphere. They are actually partly to blame for their own demise, and they refuse to do anything about it. Now, what a great conspiracy story, and I bet you I could sell that if I went out here today. You know that it's not just waste, it's not just resource, it's science in the modern world. There's a big gulf between where the science is, where scientists like to argue, and what normal people need to know and what they think they believe. That's where CIWM comes in. We are a body of knowledge, and a large part of that body of knowledge is here today. We need that body of knowledge from you guys because we have to put it back straight. And a byword for CIWM really ought to be, you might not like this, but I have to tell you the following. Because not everybody likes evidence that destroys the argument that they want to hold. And I'm going to end up amazingly chiming with Liz, because CIWM, us as an industry, the sectors around us that we work with, we've got to do two things. We've got to decide what it is that we're about, what it is that we're trying to achieve. And I challenge you, what are the big science questions that we need to answer to be able to help us to move in that right direction? Because if we can't decide the direction and we can't decide the big science questions, all we're doing is talking at each other and confusing my mum and your next door neighbour. Don't be dismal, let's be optimistic. We are a science-based revolution. Thank you very much.